Hello and welcome to this episode of Studio Data from Big Data Expo in the Jaarbeurs in Utrecht. Today we're going to talk with a scientist about how AI can be used to analyze text in the legal and for legal firms. Welcome. Hello, today we have Julien Rossi.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Julien is a scientist researcher at the University of Amsterdam, and he does research in text analytics, the application of AI, NLP models to analyze legal documents. Welcome, Julien.
Thank you.
So, what's your research about? Let's tackle it head on. What are you doing research on?
Well, let me talk a little about it. So, we set up this research to be about legal text analytics, as we say. And the starting point from that is that there's a lot of research on with NLP. There's a lot of research that's made on general text, like blog text or literature, book. And we want to focus more on this specific kind of language that is legal language. And there are as many legal language as there are legal departments, let's say. Contract, legislation, regulation, they all have their own organization. And we want to tap into that and improve on what we see currently. So the current research I'm going to present in a few minutes, that is about case law retrieval. So that's finding relevant case law when you are investigating your own case. And there's another side research on that, which is about finding which articles of the law are the most relevant to something that you describe.
So, Julien, for somebody that doesn't go so deep as you in AI, what are all these challenges regarding documents, and why do you do your research with sparsity? Why is that relevant?
Okay, we see a few challenges. First, it looks like it's written in the same language as literature, as the language we talk. But even if it's English, the legal English is very, very different. You have very long sentences with complicated structures. You have words that have a meaning in a legal sentence and they don't have the same meaning when you and I use it in everyday conversation. You have words that nobody uses. You have some Latin words in the middle of that. And it's all in the middle of long documents, and the entirety of the document makes sense. It's very dense with information. There's not a lot of fat, there's not a lot of glue, all these things that we put in this course just to make sentences. So that's a few of the challenges. And most of the NLP models that we have now, they deal well with layman language, simple sentences, shorter documents, snippets of text, than with long documents and complicated sentence. So that's this kind of gap that we're trying to reduce.
People always say that legal firms, accountancy firms that need to handle a lot of documents, they're going to benefit a lot from the use of AI solutions, or in another way, they're going to get impact. They have a big impact in their daily activities with these kind of tools. How do you see that happening? You come from the science world. How do you see the situation at companies, legal firms, accountancy firms?
That's the $1 billion research question. I'm coming from the academia, but I also have a background in business. And what I observe with a few of the companies that we discussed with is that the low-hanging fruit is document management, because that's what they have. So that's usually the first thing that comes in mind when they want to improve and they want to apply AI. That's already running with computers, so it should be improved with AI. But there's a lot more lying there that we can do. And the observation we make is that there's a technology push with this AI and all these startups that provide solutions, but most of these solutions, they don't fit a business need, let's say. They don't fit a pain point in these companies. So it leads to a lot of failures and, of course, the preservation of status quo in between in law firms. So because I'm at the business school, we also want to improve on that side of things and try to find more a business-wise angle to implement some AI-driven technology and solutions. But that would come from a business need, a clearly well-defined business need, which is not only if I press this button, I get these good results, which is if I change processes more in this way and I have interactions between my systems and the people and the lawyers, then I can create another value.
So create business pull instead of just doing tech push.
That's, yeah.
How, if I look at it, usually tech push is more disruptive, is a bigger change, more innovative, and business pull tends to be more incremental innovations. Is that still attractive for a researcher that needs to push the state of the art? How do you see your role as a researcher with organizations that they just want tiny increments?
Yeah, we don't have the same speech depending on the table you're sitting on. You don't have the same talk if you are sitting in research setting and discussing how to push forward these models and how it can improve on performance on this or this or these tasks that you have specified. That's not the same thing you discuss when you're on the table at a law firm. Some conversations we had, and you can't have that kind of conversation in this place. It is still a challenge because you want to change things that have happened for a long time, and you want to improve on these things. It can be frustrating that you can't disrupt the place in 2 months, but it's also rewarding on the long run that you are able to change the course of action. So it's clearly not the same view on things. It's not the same effort, but it's also rewarding.
So, Julien, if we go back to your research, you mentioned that there is the text you work on. It's different than the typical text these NLP models are trained with. And as a scientist, of course, you can try to work on the data or work on the algorithms. Where are you focusing more, or where do you see the most gain to be achieved?
Well, in the models we have, the algorithm itself is the data you are using for training, basically. So if we're talking about language models, basically what the system knows is what kind of text you have given him to study, let's say, if we summarize. So most of the leaders of today, like Bert, which is a star of the moment, they are trained on Wikipedia articles and on book text. So suddenly when they see some legal sentence that is very long, very complicated, and there's one sentence, there's a comma, and suddenly relative to one word, there's a lot of details and so on, that's not the usual ground. They have strengths, but it shows some of their weakness. So most of what we have to think of is, can we find relevant data to show them that they can learn this legal language? What's the good quantity for that they don't forget what they know about the normal language, so that they don't forget about the meaning of words and which are synonyms, which are the same concept. So we're working a lot more on data than on the technique itself.
So usually people ask, what does a data scientist do? How does a data scientist spend her day at work? So now the question is, how does a scientist, researcher in AI and text analytics and NLP spend his day? How does the day look for you?
It's an interesting day, first. most of the time you have an idea of what is going to arrive during the day. So that's one thing. But there's a good part of reading what's out, what was just published. There's a good part on thinking, preparing experiments. So from that point on, you try to think what kind of data do I need, what kind of this, what kind of that, and you try to gather all in a kind of small plan. There's a good chunk that is made in coding and debugging, because we, like data scientists, we have to get data, we have to clean it, to reorganize it. And then at some point we can submit it to a model that we try to train. So there's a lot of debugging on the way, there's a lot of things that go wrong. You have some time to collect your results and try to find if there's something interesting. And then you have to write about it. And you have to submit it to conferences, journals. And that writing part takes quite some time. It's not just aesthetic and trying to find the right way to talk about it, but every paragraph has a story of some hours of work. Every small table of results that looks quite boring on paper has the history of some days of training and gathering and picking up which things are interesting and which are not.
So staying with the world of research, I asked in a different episode to Mark Salomon, what is the relationship between education and companies and business? Who pulls who, right? So is education walking ahead, and then companies are trying to catch up, or is companies ahead and education tries to provide the training programs that companies need? So my question is, in the world of research and science, you start to see that a lot of AI research is done in companies like Google's and Facebook's and the like. But you are in academia. How do you see that interaction happening with companies and scientists in academia? And where does the good research happen?
Well, we are lucky to be in touch with a lot of big companies that are very much interested in research. If you think Google, Facebook, they have research departments and they publish valid research that is peer-reviewed and accepted. So in a way, they are companies, but they are also some kind of research labs that is happening. So that's one thing. And then you have a lot of companies that would benefit from applied research. We have results and we have very good advanced modelings, advanced prototypes that still need to go out in the world and meet reality in a way, to be in production, to be called for inference 1 million times a day, and be still able to deliver what they delivered on academic papers. So I see a lot in pure research that's going towards result and interesting models. But it's up to all these companies that need applied research to extract it and to pull it towards themselves.
You might argue that some of the research done by these large corporations is highly applied, and it can be called research because it's innovative, but it's just based on humongous computer power and access to a lot of data. While if you try to reproduce that research, it just doesn't hold unless you have such huge resources at your disposition. So I guess, academia needs to compete in a different way.
It's not a lost cause. If you think about the last models like BERT, that is very consuming in resource to train, for example, when it came out, it was out of the capacity of anyone to do it. And more recent models, they are estimated to have a value of more than $200,000 for training, for pre-training, let's say, preparation. But then it also generated a slew of research on how to make these models as efficient but smaller, how to reduce them, how to find in these models which smaller parts were delivering the actual performance. And this slew of research is quite successful as finding this. So we are back to scales that we can train on academic level resources. And also it should be noted that there are some universities that have better equipment or better resources than others. It's not equal. There's a resource gap around the world. But here at Amsterdam, at least, we have access to good resources.
Julien, I understand you need to go give a presentation
Yes.
very soon. I'm very happy you stopped by and spent a few minutes talking with us. Before we finish, is there something you want to say to somebody that might be considering a similar journey you took, going from industry to academia? What would you say to those persons? What would your message?
I would say do it. I was doing a complete different career before that. I was an IT manager, and I embarked on this MBA Big Data at the business school. And that's really something I do not regret.
Thank you very much, Julien. This was Studio Data from the Big Data Expo in Utrecht. Thank you very much. Thanks, Julien.